Before we get started, I've got some exciting news. HelloFresh is now a proud sponsor of Divorce and Beyond. If you've been thinking about cutting back on grocery bills, avoiding food waste, or just getting dinner on the table without stress, this is your moment because right now, HelloFresh is offering one free item in every box for life. That's right, every single box you order includes a free item forever. And just to give you a taste of what that looks like, get it, taste, I got pineapple upside down cakes in my first order. I originally discovered HelloFresh during the pandemic, and I fell in love with learning new recipes and expanding our dinner routine. I let it go for a while because, hey, I live in Chicago with world-class restaurants on every corner, but with today's rising costs, HelloFresh is back on my table, and I'm so glad it is. So if you're ready to save time, money, and dinner, go to divorceandbeyond.com/HelloFresh and sign up today to grab that free item for life. You can also find a link in the show notes or divorceandbeyond.com/HelloFresh. And now let's get into today's episode.
Coming up on today's episode of the Divorce and Beyond podcast.
Surprise! All those wages that you've been making during the marriage and you've been putting in your separate account are actually marital. And so now you've mixed in your separate money and your marital money and everything's getting divided. It's all marital. So it's kind of a nasty shock.
Hello, and welcome to the Divorce and Beyond podcast. I'm Susan Guthrie, your host. As a top divorce attorney and family law mediator for 30 years, I know what you need to know to get through your divorce and, most importantly, how to move beyond it to thrive and transition to your new future. My experts and I are here to give you the insider view into the process, so listen in for the wisdom and expert information you need on your journey through divorce and beyond. Hello and welcome to today's podcast. I'm Susan Guthrie, your host, and if you are heading into divorce, or even if you're just starting to think about it, today's episode is one you cannot afford to miss. I'm joined by my friend and fellow family law attorney, Morghan Richardson. Morgan's a partner and co-chair of the matrimonial and family law practice at Tarter, Krinsky & Drogan in New York City. Morghan represents high net worth individuals, celebrities, and innovators, guiding them through complex divorces and custody matters with both compassion and, importantly, clarity. She's also a respected thought leader in the legal community, a professor at Pace Law School, and a viral content creator working to destigmatize divorce with her fresh, modern perspective. In our conversation today, Morghan is going to share the 4 most shocking truths about divorce that no one talks about, but everyone needs to hear. So we're going to go behind the scenes to talk about some of the perhaps harsh realities around financial expectations, parenting roles, bad behavior, and property division so that you can go into your divorce with your eyes wide open and your strategy dialed in. Trust me, these are the truths that most attorneys save for the come to Jesus moment. So tune in now and save yourself from the surprises later. So Morghan, I'm glad to finally have you here. This has been an episode that's been a long time coming.
Me too. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, and I was telling you just before we started taping, I love having colleagues on, my family law colleagues on, because we're able to have conversations that I think can go behind the curtain maybe a little bit for my listeners to give them that divorce attorney perspective. Because frankly, when you've been practicing, you're younger than I am, but we've both been at this for a good long time. And when you've been doing it for a while, there are some harsh realities for our clients, shall we call it, or realizations that we've learned over time that it's helpful for people to know. And this episode is going to be one of those. We're actually going to share your top 4 things that are shocking for people to realize as they go into their divorce or go through their divorce. And so I'm looking forward to this. We've been through them, both of us, beforehand, and I think these are eye openers for people, but so valuable to know.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. It's such a great topic. And I think it's just something that people don't really understand if they're not in this industry.
Right. Well, and I think we as practitioners, having done this for a long time, it can be helpful to us because I do have a lot of practitioners who listen to remember that our clients come through the door with maybe certain expectations or what they understand about the process. And we may know those expectations or understandings are not correct, but sometimes we don't help them ahead of time, or we wait until the issues come up before we sort of have that, as I've always called it, the come to Jesus chat with them, right? Where we tell them the harsh truths or those realities. So here you're going to share 4 of them that I think are going to be so valuable for people to know ahead of time. They are shocking. They are difficult to take in, but the value here is you're going to know them before you go into your divorce. Or if you're already in your process, you're going to be able to adjust your expectations and then your strategy as you go through the process, right? I mean, that's really why it's so important to know these things.
Absolutely. And I think these are conversations that most family law attorneys end up having at some point. But I would question, if you're in a consultation with an attorney and they aren't giving you any negatives about what's about to happen, that's a red flag.
Yes.
So my first point that I think people are really shocked to find out about is this idea of a return on your investment for sacrificing during your marriage. So I get a lot of women who they give of themselves so much. I think women tend to do that, especially mothers. Like we give all of our time, all of our energy, all of our effort. We may be sacrificing friendships or even just little things like, I don't have enough time to exercise. I can't get to the gym, or, I'm letting my hair go. I'm not going to get it done for a little while. Those types of sacrifices. There's so much to sacrifice in a relationship. And there's no return on that. There's no return on investment. There's no ROI for your sacrifice. So you get into court and you're expecting all of this stuff that you've let go because you haven't been taking for yourself. You've just been giving to the family. You're expecting some sort of compensation or some sort of recognition, even sometimes. And that's just not going to happen. That's not what the divorce court is set up to do. You're not going to get that acknowledgement from the judge. And you definitely are not going to get that acknowledgement from the other side of the table. Your spouse is not going to be giving that acknowledgement for the most part in a contested divorce situation.
Yeah, it's such a good point, and it really is something that sadly is misunderstood, I think, by so many people coming into divorce. And I think you appropriately point out that it's mostly women who come into the situation with this perhaps expectation that all the sacrifice that they have put into their family, and this could be stay-at-home moms, but it's also women who go to work every single day as well, just as maybe their spouse does. But I mean, statistics show, right, that women are the ones that carry both an external workload. They go to jobs, maybe perhaps, but also within the household and within the family structure, women do more. They're the ones who are setting the schedules and making sure everyone has what they need and making the play dates and getting everyone where they're supposed to be. That just tends to be effort that women put in a disproportionate way than men. So it is sort of gender based, although of course we can see both things there. But yeah, nobody's sitting down and tallying that up at the time of the divorce and writing you a check for it.
Exactly. And I think this came up in a conversation I had just on a personal basis where someone was asking me, how do you you're always posting about being on bike rides. How do you even find the time? You have kids, you're, a partner in a law firm in Manhattan. How do you find the time to make that time for yourself? And it's just, I have to prioritize that. I'm not going to sacrifice that. I'm not going to come to the end of this and be like, I did nothing for myself. I let everything go that meant something to me. And so even just in thinking about healthy marriages or healthy relationships, I want people to keep that in mind. That's not something that you should give on. That should be something you prioritize for yourself.
Yeah, I think women, we are socialized and raised with that certain mindset of sacrifice. That's a perfect word for it. I was glad you used it when you were describing this. But I love that you say that, because it's maybe one of the golden nuggets for listeners here, whether you're male or female. But as you are either in a relationship now, or, my podcast is always about the beyond of divorce as well. Hopefully you will find yourself in another relationship in the future, balancing everything and taking for yourself rather than sacrificing so much, because in the end, that sacrifice there is no return on investment for it. And that is something that, for expectation setting, your attorney should be letting you know, because if you're going into your divorce negotiations thinking that, the balance sheet is going to be shifted because you didn't get your hair done, or like you said, or whatever the thing was, you didn't go on that bike ride because you were taking care of something for the family. There is no adjustment at the end due to that.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that kind of leads into my second point that people get shocked about. And that's that there is no real punishment for bad behavior throughout the marriage. So people will find themselves in these relationships where one side or the other is just not contributing equally, whether that's financial or really with a lot of times within the domestic household, within the domestic labor that needs to be happening. Somebody's not doing the laundry, someone never plans anything, you hear a lot of times, this is stereotypical, but it's the woman who will say, he never once bought me a birthday gift. He doesn't know where our kids even go to school. He's never gone to the pediatrician. He doesn't take any time off of work if someone's sick. They have this laundry list of things that can run from small grievances to large grievances, but there's not really a system in place from the court's perspective to penalize that person. There are exceptions. If we're talking about domestic violence, something severe, there can be exceptions to that. But even those exceptions, it's not as drastic or draconian as you would imagine. It's not going to be some super harsh penalty for the most part. People are shocked a lot of times. They think they're saving up this laundry list of things that they want to complain about to the judge. Just wait till the judge hears that. And the judge is just going to be very dismissive. The court system overall, and this is definitely true in New York, and I'm sure elsewhere, we've moved away from hearing about people's dirty laundry issues to, we just want to help you divide your stuff and figure out where the kids are going to be.
Right. And move you beyond this into your next phase. And I think that's really important for people to understand. And you explained it so well, because it can be all the little things that added up that you think you said laundry list of grievances. Who hasn't come into their attorney's office with a laundry list of grievances? And sometimes they are this accumulation of small things. Sometimes it's really big, bad behaviors, people who disappear money, who have cheated, who have done all these things. But we do know the reality is that in a courtroom, there's very little consideration given for those things. That punishment that you might be looking for, the vindication, the judge making things right for you. It's just not going to happen. One that I've heard so often, and I bet you've heard it as well, is where you, and it kind of leans back to the first shocking thing that you were talking about, the return on investment for sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
But when you have, say, one parent who has been out of the workforce, say, for a while, I've always had the other parent come in and say, well, once the kids went back to school, I begged him or her to go get a job. I told them to get a job. They just didn't, but they should have. And so, I shouldn't have to pay as much. They could have gone back to work and didn't. And I'm like, coulda, woulda, shoulda is kind of the way this rolls out. You lived with it. They didn't. The judge isn't now going to look back and sort of carve out, well, they could have.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so true. And I think that's becomes really complicated. If someone's out of work, or maybe someone takes a step back to deal with children when they're super small, and then now the children are going to school, it can be harder for them to get back into the workforce. But if they don't have any incentive, are you going to file for divorce right away? Like, is that the message? Maybe, I don't know that we're trying to say, jump on it right away and file right away before it becomes the status quo. But also, just keep in mind, there's not necessarily a balancing of what they should have done or what they could have done from the court's perspective anyway.
Yeah. I mean, the courts rarely look back at that. I've always tried to explain being a mediator and a litigator over the time of my career. My way of explaining the difference between litigation and mediation has always been that litigation is past focused, right? Who did what, who earned what, et cetera. Whereas mediation is very much forward focused. How are we going to plot your path to your futures, right? But you pointed this out, and I think that this is important for people to understand. Litigation is becoming less past focused. I think that, and it's becoming more, at least, what's the picture right now? Because everything that you chose to do up to now is what got you here. And what we're looking at today in the courtroom, deciding how you're going to move forward, is what your snapshot of your world is today, and much less of that backwards focus.
Yes. And that leads into my third point.
Let's take a quick break here to hear from our sponsor, YumiU. You'll want to check them out, and I've got a special link for you in the show notes with a discount. And when we come back, Morghan is breaking down one of the biggest myths about property division and why what's fair might not mean what you think it does. So stay tuned. Let's take a little minute to talk about something special. If you follow me on Instagram, you all know how much I love my evil eye pendant. I love I have my bracelet. I have the pendant that goes around my neck. I wear evil eyes all the time. And so many of you have reached out asking where I got them. I'm thrilled to share with you all, drum roll please, that my favorite jewelry source, YumiU Jewelry, is now a sponsor of Divorce and Beyond. For me, YumiU Jewelry is more than just jewelry. The symbols are symbols of strength, individuality, and empowerment. And they handcraft each piece with love and care. And so they are designed to help women stand out and embrace our unique personalities. So whether it's an evil eye, like I have chosen for protection, a hamsa for faith, or any other meaningful symbol, their pieces offer beauty and inspiration even during these tough times like divorce. So here's the best part. YumiU is giving my listeners an exclusive discount if you use the code BEYOND, that's BEYOND, all caps, at checkout. You'll get 20% off your order. 20%. So if you're looking for a meaningful piece to keep you inspired or to protect you during this difficult time, visit divorcebeyond.com/YumiU. That's YUMIYU. There will be a link in the show notes. And treat yourself or treat someone you love to something special. You deserve it. Now, let's get back to the second half of the show.
Custody isn't really what you think. I have a lot of situations where, I have a client, usually the mom, coming in and saying, hey, he doesn't know where the school is. He doesn't know who the teachers are. He's never been to the pediatrician's office. He refuses to take any time off. So I go on vacation alone with these kids. Like, he is not an active parent. But all dad has to do, especially here in New York, is really just come in and say, but I want to know those things, but I want to do those things. And the court's going to be like, okay, yeah. It doesn't matter what his track record is of not being there or not participating. What matters is looking at where is he at now and how much participation does he want? Does he want a 50-50 schedule? And I feel like more and more the court's going to say, okay, 50-50 schedule sounds great. If as long as he's not a danger, maybe he doesn't do things exactly how mom does them, but he is interested in trying to figure these things out and he's saying he wants to participate. So we're going to give him the chance to do it. And I think that shocks a lot of clients because they're just not prepared for that. They have, again, sacrificed so much because of the dynamic. And for him to then just come in and say, well, I don't want that to be the dynamic anymore. And the court to say, okay, it's shocking to them. It's shocking.
It is. That's almost one where you can see the head figuratively explode in your office. And it's hard, and I get it, right? I've been in practice for 35 years. And so when I first started practicing, it was in a much more traditional time, right? 35 years ago, custody was always with moms. Almost, I would say 99% of the time. Dad got every other weekend and one weeknight for dinner or something like that. I mean, it was so simple back in those days. And now we have very much moved into this world of equal parenting time, even if that isn't historically what a family has done. And truly, almost all families are not historically 50-50 when they're living under the same roof, because there's no need to be that. We don't live our lives by a calendar or a scorecard or a timesheet when we live under the same roof. But I think the shocker, right, is when people realize, and often it's moms, that the other parent who hasn't been as participatory is going to be given the chance by the court to be fully participatory. And what they have or have not done in the past, unless, as you really importantly point out, they're not a danger to their child. But giving them dessert for dinner is not necessarily a danger. Putting them to bed half an hour later than you put them to bed is not necessarily a danger. The things that people see as a danger or not in their children's best interest, that's a tough line for people. It's funny because the episode that came out right before this episode with you was a review of what legally the best interests of the children means. And so this sort of builds on that, because what really is the best interests of the children, and how is that really playing out in a parenting plan? And as you just point out, the court has sort of made an assumption that equal parenting is often in the best interests of children.
I think it's so hard sometimes too, because as moms, we have certain ways of doing things and we feel like we've done research into that. And, we've put so much of our time and energy into finding the perfect way to parent our kids, and that no one else can replace us. No one else can even come close to that. And I always try to reassure my clients that's still true, and your child is still going to see you as mom. But I like to tell people, love is not a pie. There's not less of it if someone gets a slice, so it's something that expands. So other women may come into dad's life, or dad may step up into a role where he's just going to be an active dad now. That's still never going to replace one parent. You can't replace. Parents are not replaceable that way. Love is not a pie. It grows. Your child is better off having more people in their life that love them and that care about them. It's always a hard conversation, but I think it's worthwhile to set those expectations.
I think it's critical, honestly, because it can take time for this realization to actually sink in. And I think it really stems from, I'm wondering what you think, and is because it's a fear. You talked about it being replaced. You used that phrase. And I know that's in parents' minds when they're thinking about another person being in that mother role or father role in the other household. But there's also, and have you heard this from clients before? Because I have so many times, is I can't imagine not seeing my children every day, or I can't imagine the first night of Hanukkah without them, or whatever. And it's very personal and internal to the parent. It's not focused on the child and how they're going to experience that first night of Hanukkah or not seeing them every single day. It's very focused on, our feeling of loss, which is so understandable, so human, so, but it is our feeling, not our child's feeling.
I think that's such an important distinction, to be honest, because people do tend to focus on it because it is their loss, and it is a loss. I'm divorced. I absolutely understand what it's like to not have my kids on certain holidays. But we come up with ways of celebrating around that, to still preserve that, and that's my loss because they're not losing anything by celebrating those holidays with their dads. That they're just not. It is a difficult conversation, and it's definitely a personal one, but it's also a shock, I think, for a lot of people who just really assumed, custody, I have this in the bag. I don't have to worry about that. He thinks he's going to do whatever. And then they get surprised because, a lot of dads, there are some very good dads out there that will step up and will do the things that perhaps sadly, if they had done during the marriage, they had done those things, they might not be getting divorced. So that's another message too.
We have seen that realization, dawn on people through the process as well. But unfortunately, it's usually too late by the time that comes to them. But I think there's huge value if somebody out there, one of my listeners or any of the listeners are, in the early stages of divorce or thinking about divorce. This is one of those golden nuggets, those kernels of truth, that the sooner you start working through the emotional entanglement of this and the concept of the fact that you won't have your children with you. It's a rare divorced co-parent who has their children with them 100% of the time. Once you're able to process that, looking at the possibilities that it then opens up for you and by extension, your children. So now maybe you have additional time in your schedule to travel more or to do more. And that trickles down to your children because now they have a parent who's experiencing more things in their life and their child can see that. I just give that one as an example, but it means the world's going to be different than maybe what you saw it as. And I think that's hard, but it is a reality. It is a truth. And it actually, for so many people, it turns out to be a wonderful reality post-divorce. We've seen that both, I assume.
Absolutely. It's like a silver lining. I kind of have a joke about how my favorite holiday of the year is actually Father's Day because I send the kids to their dads and then I get the day to myself. I don't have to do all the planning. I don't have to worry about, which grandfather needs to be involved or any of that stuff. It's just, there you go. It's on you. So you try to find that silver lining and try to take that. And I think that also then circles back to that notion that like maybe you've sacrificed a lot. Now you're getting a little bit of me time that you can try to balance, and you maybe are striking or forcibly, albeit striking this balance in your life again, where you do have time for yourself, but you still have time for your kids and you still have, those two worlds. That brings me to my last point.
We know, number 4.
Number 4. So I think people are generally shocked by equitable distribution, which is the New York property division laws. So I'll get clients in, and this happens so frequently, where they're like, I always just kept my money separate. It's in my own account. He has his money in his account. And we've always just kept everything separate. And then it's like, surprise, all those wages that you've been making during the marriage and you've been putting in your separate account are actually marital. And so now you've mixed in your separate money and your marital money and everything's getting divided. It's all marital. So it's kind of a nasty shock. Or I have people who say, well, I protected myself. I bought the house before the marriage. Oh, okay. But then you started paying the mortgage with your wages that you were earning during the marriage. So once again, surprise, like here's this nasty surprise waiting for you that you have now contributed marital funds into your separate property. And we're going to have some sorting out to do because your spouse now has a claim to it. But then I also have those clients where, there's one party who just pays for everything. They're the higher earner. They pay for everything. And the other party, maybe they're staying home with the child, or maybe they're staying home and not contributing as much, or they just don't earn as much. So, they've just been using their money on themselves. And now, there's this equitable distribution idea where equitable is not equal. So I paid more, so therefore I should get more back. But the court looks at a number of factors when doing that and may say, actually, it's going to be more like equal anyway, especially if you're in a longer duration marriage. Like once you start hitting 10 years, you are definitely looking at more and more, we're going to chop this in half. So that's a nasty surprise too.
Well, it's another one of those big eye openers, and it's funny because I practiced in Connecticut, which is also an equitable distribution state, and I was there for about 26 years. And so equitable distribution, very much what I was dealing with. Then I moved to California, community property state, and little naive me moving over to community property, I was of that opinion or that idea that, well, community property is easy because everything just gets split right down the middle and nobody ever questions that. And I just want to set expectations for everyone out there. If you're not in an equitable distribution state and you're in a community property state and you're thinking like I did, it's exactly the opposite. Here's another eye opener for you.
Surprise!
I think that community property is even more complicated than equitable distribution is because nothing gets divided directly down the middle, or rarely does it. Because they have so many exceptions to the rule, et cetera. And it's a similar conversation to what you just said. So I think it's maybe the eye opener here is that property distribution, whatever scheme that you're falling under, is not what you are thinking, because people come in and really, I think what we're saying here is they come in thinking through their lens of what they think is fair. Right. Mm-hmm. And I happen to call fair the F word of divorce. I'm not a big fan of the word fair because for exactly this reason, because everyone's perception of what is fair is different. I guarantee if you sit down with your spouse, well, you're going through a divorce and you put on the table what you think is fair, they're probably not going to see it the same way. That's kind of how that works. And that's, really what it comes down to is people walk in thinking, well, the law is going to be fair on property distribution. And that's not what it says really at all. It says equitable. People think that means fair, not necessarily. And community property is the same. So I have to say that you get a lot of eye openers when it comes to property distribution.
Yes, I think it's so interesting because it is that mentality that, I thought we had an agreement. I put these things in my name. They put these things in their name, and we don't need to fight about it because we just already kept it separate. And unless you did that with a prenup or a postnup, your agreement is not binding. And so it's something that people, I think, need to be aware of.
Oh, God, yes. Right. Like they come in and they think that the fact that, well, the house has always been in my name. And there's a lot of reasons why people do that, right? Like I always had clients who were in high risk industries and didn't want assets in their name in case they were sued or what. So they'd keep the house or the assets in the other spouse's name. That didn't mean the other spouse got to keep all the assets 100% at the time of the dissolution, right? So people have a lot of misconceptions when it comes to their property distribution. And the big takeaway from all of these, because there are more, but these are, I think, the big, we'll call them the big four. I think the biggest takeaway here is when you come into your divorce negotiations with preconceived notions and expectations, you can almost be certain that those are going to be shattered. It is not a process that lends itself to your expectations, unless those expectations have been set through your attorney having those come to Jesus moments with you. I think one of the biggest important things that you said in this entire episode is if you're in a consultation with an attorney and that attorney is all roses and sunshine about getting you everything that you want, and it's all going to be, in accordance with what you think is fair and reality, that should be a huge red flag that you better check that attorney out or perhaps go talk to some more before you do any hiring.
Oh, absolutely. I think you really want to have an attorney that is going to be honest with you and give you, we all kind of know there's a range of what's going to happen here. There's the high end and there's the low end of the range. And the fight is really trying to figure out where in between those highs and lows we can get your case to end up. You want somebody who's going to be honest with you and talk about it. It's so funny because I always get these requests, I'm looking for a shark. I want a shark. I want someone who's so tough. Oh, okay. Do you know how small a shark's brain is? Do you know that a shark is going to eat its own young in the water if there's blood in the water? You do not want a shark. You do not want someone who is trying to scare you or trying to sell you on something. You want someone who's going to be a real partner here in trying to solve these puzzles that you have made, to try to figure out what is the solution. You want a problem solver. You don't need someone who might accidentally bite you too.
Yeah, you don't want your own attorney to eat you. Right.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunately, right. What happens with that shark attorney is they get in there and they start swinging and fighting and, running off to court to argue every little, issue that you raise, whether it's winnable or not. And what they do is end up eating you because they eat up your finances. And that's one of the reasons why this episode is actually so important for people, because when you go into your divorce with unrealistic expectations and an attorney who feeds your unrealistic expectations as opposed to helps you understand why they're unrealistic, that means your divorce is going to be longer, more conflictual, and way more expensive. That's the shark attorney.
Exactly. Absolutely. And I think we all know those attorneys too, because what people don't understand is lawyers see each other all the time. The matrimonial bar is not that big. The matrimonial the bench is not that big. We see the same judges, we see the same lawyers over and over again throughout different cases. And we can identify, I think we can all identify who is the problem. Who is that attorney that's going to just churn up conflict that's unnecessary and cause problems and cost people extra money.
Yeah. I mean, I will say, and I've said this to clients, that, they come in and they've been served with divorce papers and I see that name on the summons and I say to them, normally my retainer is this, but unfortunately, I happen to know your spouse's counsel and I know their style. And unfortunately, for cases with that firm or that person, our retainer is higher because you just know. And there were actually a couple where I just knew I wasn't going to take that case. I think every attorney, after you've been at it for a while, you realize that there are some colleagues that it's just better off not to engage with. There are other attorneys better suited to deal with them. So I don't miss that part of the practice, I have to tell you. So many golden nuggets in this episode for my listeners. And you've mentioned, and I mentioned in the intro, that you are in New York. I know your practice, much like mine when I was in Connecticut, is focused on high net worth, and you represent many celebrities and well-known people, but you do have clients from across the spectrum, as well as the other attorneys in your firm and your matrimonial division handle that. How would it be best for people to reach out to you if they're in New York or they're looking for assistance?
My firm is Tarter, Krinsky and Drogan, so my profile is there. I also have my own website, email, social media. I am on Instagram. I am presently on TikTok, as long as TikTok is around, and Facebook and those types of things. And I am happy to talk to people, even if they don't think that we're going to be the right fit, maybe financially, maybe my hourly rate sounds intimidating. I still like to give my time to people because this is the one area of the law, this in criminal law, family law and criminal law, those are the areas where regular people intersect with the law. And I think it's sort of our obligation to sort of give back a little and talk to people. So I'm always happy to do that. And if I'm not the right lawyer, I try to point them in the right direction because there may be a better fit for them.
Well, and I think you've just shown in this episode, you showed the value you bring even in a consultation, right? You just shared the 4 truths and helped people set expectations in this episode. So just imagine the value of being able to speak with Morghan about your case personally. So I recommend you reach out, and I'll tell you all, go follow her on Instagram. That is how I found Morghan. You guys know I find my people who resonate with me on Instagram, and many of them show up here on the podcast, but she has a great Instagram feed. I follow her there, and I will put the links to all of her social media as well as her contact information in the show notes for you all. Morghan, thank you so much for coming and shocking my listeners today.
Thank you so much for having me.
They'll find a lot of value in your insights. Thank you so much. So many great insights in this episode, but let's recap a few of the golden nuggets from today's conversation with Morghan. First, there's no return on investment for your sacrifice during marriage. Emotional labor doesn't come with a payout in court. Golden nugget number 2, the legal system isn't designed to punish bad behavior, not in family court. So don't expect justice, expect strategy. Number 3, custody isn't based on the past. It's about what each parent wants and is willing to do now. Number 4, and when it comes to dividing assets, what feels fair isn't always what the law says is fair. So make sure you understand your rights and how the law actually works. As Morghan reminded us, the earlier you adjust your expectations, the better your strategy and your outcome will be. Thank you for joining me today on the Divorce and Beyond podcast. I hope you found some information and inspiration to help you on this journey. Please join me every Monday at 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for a new episode. And if you like the show, please take the time to subscribe and leave me a 5-star review on iTunes. You can also find more information on the website at divorceandbeyondpod.com, where you'll find links to the YouTube channel, transcripts of the episodes, and other bonus content. So I'll see you next week to help you move through your divorce and beyond.